So welcome to a little kind of mini class, around 45 minutes-ish or so. Mostly we're going to focus on the hips in a really gentle way. Now I have constructed this little setup here, so I've gotten a fairly robust pillow and I've propped it up so that it's at an angle. So you might need to build up like a little stack of pillows or couch cushions. You might need, if you have some yoga blocks, you could just do a yoga block under your shoulders and one under your head maybe, and not the pillow. But in any case, just kind of prop yourself up in a way that seems okay to you. We're going to start with a reclining butterfly pose. So the feet are going to go together with the knees dropped open. You can put a little bit of support under the legs, which is what I'm going to do with a blanket. And then we'll pause there for a bit. We'll start, I don't know, about 3 minutes or so of breathing and hanging out with that pose. Okay, so giving myself quite a lot of height here. And I can decide that sometimes a little bit of extra support under the head feels good. Sometimes I can achieve that by simply gathering up the ends of my hair. But you might want an extra pillow or a blanket if that is not going to work for you. Now, I'm trying to basically just relax everything in the shoulders and in the arms. So this hanging off of this bolster a little bit creates this kind of traction down through my arms, through the neck and shoulders, which hopefully will turn out okay. I'm gonna give it a try. And then I've got this position for the hips. You can bring your feet in closer or farther away, it just depends on how your knees feel about life. And then pause and breathe. Just going to continue with this for a little bit longer, about another minute, just breath awareness and sinking in. Starting to feel just the tiniest bit of release in the shoulders, which I'm finding pleasant. I'm going to do 3 more breaths. So the first thing I'm going to change is just my legs. And then I've got to get this bolster out from behind me. So I'm going to roll to the side and get it away. to come back onto my back. Oh. And I'm feeling like I could use a little bit of head support. So I'm going to take the blanket that I had underneath my knees and put that underneath my head and then smooth it out and create a little support. I'm finding things over here. I'm just going to create a little support for my head here. Okay, so starting just by noticing how things may have wound up. I had a lot of feeling of kind of my arms getting closer and closer and closer to the ground as we held that. So I'm just sort of trying to appreciate those muscles no longer being tugged on and seeing how they're feeling. And then also just noticing any impact in these sore places on my neck. So sometimes you wake up with all kinds of soreness. Just have to work with it. All right. So I've got my right foot resting on the floor and my left ankle up on top of my right thigh. So that's how I'm going to start out. You could do either leg first. Just pick a side. And then I'm kind of dropping the legs back and forth here. And as I drop over one direction, it kind of turns into a twist. As I drop over the other direction, I get some really interesting sensations in the glute. I just want to make sure I don't go so far that it starts to land in the knee. Glute's cool, knee not so great. So I'm going to take this whole thing, and if this is enough sensation, you can feel it in your left hip, don't go anywhere else. Just stay right there. If it feels okay to do it, then you can bring the legs in and let yourself even kind of hug the legs or hold on to the leg. I'm going to let my right leg straighten back out in a moment, so I'm just leaving myself holding on lightly to this left leg. And in a moment I'll give you more ideas around that. But if it feels like your knee is in trouble already, make sure that the toes are pointing the same direction as the knee so that there's no turning in the lower leg bones, and then flex the foot, and that helps support the knee joint there. And I'm going to do all of that now as I hold on to this leg. There's a chance for me to accidentally torque it, so I'm really holding steady with this knee and shin. And then I'm going to stretch my right leg out. Now my right hip is tighter than my left side on this kind of hip flexor front area. So it doesn't take much for that to start to feel stretchy. Just holding this leg and reaching out through that leg is enough. But if it feels like you need a little bit more, you can tilt yourself over so that you take the hip up off the ground a little bit. And I just hold it with the foot. And I hold my foot so I can hold myself in place. And then with a little bit of lift underneath the hip, there's more drop over. So this stretches just a little bit more, and you could even include the arm if you want to add on. I don't need a lot of that on my right side. On my left side, things may change. And so just a couple more breaths of this little hip flexor release. And I'll take one more big inhale. And then I'm going to let go and return the two legs to the floor so that my feet are resting on the ground. And I like these kind of wide windshield wipers, so I just kind of have a neutral thing. There's not a different thing happening with each hip right now. They're both doing the same thing. And I could then compare and contrast with the one leg up. And then I'm just going to stretch out both legs, both arms. All right, so then bringing my legs back, just noticing, is there a difference between the right side and the left side? There might be a little difference. Might not be there. Might be no difference. Just notice what is. And then I'm going to take my right ankle and put it up on top. And again, I'm going to go to this kind of windshield wipery move back and forth. This mostly turns into a twist on this side. Things get kind of interesting in this adductor or abductor external hip rotator area. So you feel out what's true for you. I'm kind of traveling down my mat and leaving my clothes back up where I came from. But I'm only going to do a few more rounds here. All right, so then once I come back to the center, I'm going to bring the legs in. Oh. Starting with both legs. For me, that's a nice place to begin, just kind of noticing the stretch in the hip. And again, if it's more than you need, just put your foot back down on the ground. And then I'm going to add on to this with the left leg straight in just a few breaths. And just as a reminder, keep these two lower leg bones nice and stable so there's not a twist in that area if your knee is particularly vulnerable. So you're going to keep that nice and steady and then stretch that other leg out if you care to. You can also stay with the two legs together version. And then I'm just going to pull that leg over a little bit so there's a little bit more lift for this left side. Oh. Okay, so I'm going to come on back, release that leg, bring both feet to the ground, and again, I'm just going to notice as I do these little wide windshield wipers. Oh. And then stretch both legs out nice and long, and just see if there's a difference now versus the last time I checked this out. Sometimes it feels like one of my legs has gotten a little bit longer, a little bit softer. So I like to notice things that have occurred during the practice. All right, so we're going to come to a seated position. We'll do the remaining kind of collection of our hip openers there. But if before you get to the seated position, if you want, you can do some kneeling cat-cow movements or some downward dog, that sort of thing. And then join me in a seated position in a moment. Oh. Oh. All right, I have arrayed around me a few props that I might need for the purposes of doing these little seated hip openers. So I have some pillows, so I've got those in case I want them. But more likely is going to be a blanket, a block, and a strap. And so if you have things like that at your house, definitely get those out. The blankets are useful for a couple of different reasons. Some of the hip openers you may want to sit up higher. So you can sit up on a blanket, you can use a block to support knees or ankles or elbows along the way. And the strap is going to help provide a little bit of resistance for a couple of poses. So we're going to start with a deer pose, and it's mostly we're going to do a sitting up version of this deer pose. So one leg goes just in front, and essentially just the thigh goes out, and then the knee makes a 90-degree angle. And then we're going to take the other leg kind of out to the side. So the thigh points straight out to the side instead of pointing forward. And then there's a little bit of an angle there. Now, you can fold forward if you like. For me, I'm just going to kind of leave my elbow on the block and try to sit up mostly. Mostly what I'm doing with the deer pose is I'm trying to release this hip kind of down toward the floor. So there's a little bit of an internal rotation here, which is a little bit unusual. You don't do that hip movement with the hips very often. And for me, it's mostly kind of a sense of pressure. It doesn't feel, I don't want it to be too strong. We're just going for kind of a gentle sort of sense of a little bit of resistance here in the hip. Now you might have to lean a little bit more to the side to make it right for your particular anatomy. Don't be afraid to do that. We're all built a little differently. I'm going to hold this for about 4 more breaths. So this leg that's behind me is coming up on top of this leg that's up front. And this is gonna, for me, it's gonna become what's generally referred to as fire logs or double pigeon, or in the yin world, it would be called square pose. But for you, it might be better to bring the two knees more close together. The other thing that I'm gonna do to adapt this pose is I'm gonna put a block up in front because my ankle joint pushes a little uncomfortably on the tender inner thigh area. Now, the only thing I'm interested, like the main thing I'm interested in is getting the two thighs closer together, because the closer I can bring these two thighs together, the more this outer hip gets targeted, and that's what I'm after. So for me right now, just sitting up tall and leaning just a notch forward is all I need to start to feel that sensation. Some people can actually lean backwards and feel it, and so you can lean backwards. If you feel it in your hip, you don't have to lean forward. And then there are other people that might need more forward momentum, and you can go down, even all the way down to the point where your elbows rest on the floor if that seems appropriate. So just working with your range of motion. Ooh. So I'm going to hold this for about 4 more breaths. All right, so I'm going to come out of here, release this leg. It's going straight up front so that I've got essentially the little butterfly shape on this side, so you can pull the foot in closer if you like. And then the leg that was on top and that was doing the kind of reverse deer is now just straight out. So I'm going to use my strap for this point because I want to create a little bit of resistance. And essentially, I'm going to use it so that I can pull on it with both hands. So I've got the strap around the ball of my foot. I'm going to, almost like I'm pushing on the gas, I'm going to kind of press the foot forward, bend the knee, and then try to lift the kneecap up so I've engaged the quads quite firmly. And then I'm going to gently sort of guide my pelvis forward using the resistance of the strap. So push it into it, engaging all the muscle there, and then leaning the pelvis into the stretch so that I feel it all the way through the back of this leg and maybe even through the glutes. As I push on the strap and kind of pull against it, I also get a little calf muscle action. So really the whole back of my left leg is quite long, and then I'm engaging the quads, so the top of my leg is also quite active. Oh. Again, I'm just going to hang out for a while, about 4 or 5 more breaths. Take a nice big inhale, and then I'm going to back off of all of that activity and just release that leg. That one's been bent a while, so I'm going to let that one straighten out as well. Now I'm just doing this little kind of shimmy pandiculative movement. In a second I'm going to do the other side. So if you, again, you can add into here some cat-cows or some downward dog, and then come back down, and then we'll do the other leg, other hip. Okay, so I'm going to take the deer on this side. Just kind of finding my way into there. for me, like one side's a little different than the other. I might just leave a bit more, a little bit more height for the elbow here. Again, right hip, a little more sensitive than the left hip. A little more resistant to stretchiness. Just making some adjustments. Nice deep breaths. Okay, so now I'm going to lean this way and bring that leg around. And so it's going to go right up on top here. And again, I'm just kind of noticing how much forward and or backward momentum feels like it's just right. So this whole outer hip is getting some sensation without causing any trouble for the knee. Paying attention, kind of weaving in a little bit, leaning a little bit left, leaning a little bit right. Just noticing where the sensation feels interesting. Taking nice deep breaths. Okay, so I'm going to come out of there. Let that leg straighten out. And again, this leg is going to get really, really active. So I just want to play with all these other elements. Like how far in do I want my foot to go? Do I need some extra support? That sort of jazz. And then hanging on with both hands so I can create this kind of little bit of resistance there. I'm going to try to pick up my kneecap, engage those quads nice and firm, press the foot into the strap and kind of resist by pulling on it, and then leaning the pelvis as far forward as it wants to go until I feel that stretch through my whole leg on the back side. There's muscular engagement here on the top, but the stretchy sensation is coming from calves, hamstrings, and glutes. A little bit low back too. It's all connected, yogis. So take in nice deep breaths. And then every now and then I have to check in and just make sure I'm still engaging my quads. They sometimes sneak out of there when I'm not watching. When I start watching the breath. Couple more breaths. Okay, big breath. And then I'm going to let go. So again, I'm just for a moment, you're going to just kind of give everything a little movement. Now, I'm going to take my legs out in this wide position. And for some folks, that kind of tilts the pelvis back. So a great notion is to take a few blankets or a blanket, or maybe you need more than one, but to kind of pile up to sit on so that your pelvis is a little bit elevated. You could sit on a block if you wanted to. I just feel like they're a little bit too high. So somewhere about half that size, about 2 inches would be a nice kind of place. This is like the smallest setting on this block is 4 inches width anyway. So a folded blanket might be a little bit more accommodating. But you can try it out and see what you think is best. I'm putting this little bit of a blanket underneath my knees. Now, I'm going to start with a twist, and I'm really interested in isolating this twist between my collarbones and my belly button. So I'm doing the twist with the legs straight rather than bent, because when I bend my knees, I tend to recruit more of my pelvis for the twist. Now, nothing wrong with that. It's just I'm trying to isolate my middle and upper back into the twist tonight. So I'm turning everything around. I'm just going to let my head follow and keep my chin lined up with my breastbone, so I'm not overdoing it with the neck. I know when I'm starting to bring my pelvis because this sit bone will come off the ground. So I'm going to try to just let the sit bone stay planted so that really this twist is happening in my middle and upper back. And then I'm drawing one shoulder blade a little bit forward and up, and then this shoulder blade down and in to kind of give a little bit more of the twist to that upper back area. Shoulder blade zone. I'm just going to hold this for about 3 more breaths. All right, now I'm going to let the upper back relax, but still sort of facing this direction with the navel. I'm going to come over into a side bend. Now, again, I have a little bit of neck soreness today, so I'm going to put a block there. I'm going to rest my head on my hands so that the stretch that I'm getting on the side of my neck is very supported and very gentle. I can take my spine a little further over into it, but for the neck, I'm trying to be really conscientious. I want to give these muscles a little bit of release, but I don't want to be abusive because they're so tender. Now for you, it might feel really nice to even bring the arm up and over your head, and you can do that as you like. This is really where I'm going to stay. It's just right here with the most gentle side bend that I can create. Again, mostly we're about the hips today, and what we're releasing here is this area in the low back where the muscles that live between the rib cage and the top of the pelvis live. And these are tender little muscles. They have a lot of fiber directional changes. So some fibers go in some directions, some even kind of weave themselves in such a way that they almost act like ligaments in the lumbar spine. So this is tend to be a sensitive area. So a gentle approach is always nice anyway, even if you don't have currently a neck pain situation going on. So I'm going to take a couple, like 3 more breaths, maybe 4. Because I've been easing my way into this, kind of letting things go and relax and lean. Okay, so I'm going to support my head all the way through the range of motion, all the way back up. So engaging these muscles on my side until it feels like I'm back into the center point. And I'm just going to pause for a moment, see if I may have done the right thing or not. There's an initial kind of response of tightening. So I'm gonna leave just for a couple more breaths. I'm just gonna leave this where it is. Everything's starting to relax now, so that's good. But I still feel like I'm leaning or twisting that way just a little bit. So once I get back to the center, I'm just gonna notice, like, does it feel like my sides of my back feel more even, or do I need another breath or 2? And once it feels pretty even, I'm gonna start to kind of spiral the lower part of my ribs, and then I'm gonna spiral, I'm gonna keep my chin again lined up with my breastbone. I'm just gonna spiral that upper back. As soon as I feel my hips start to come with me, I know I'm done, so just stay put. And then this shoulder blade, I'm just letting draw out a little bit, and this right shoulder blade now I'm trying to plant more deeply into the middle of my back. So the action that I'm doing in the twist is to sort of move the shoulder blades more than anything else. Everything else, a very gentle kind of twist here. And then just breathing. Holding steady and breathing. Every now and then I can, after a few moments, snuggle that shoulder blade a little farther in and a little farther down, like the muscles kind of let go a little bit. And again, I'm trying to keep my neck just aligned with my torso. So wherever that goes, my neck is just along for the ride. But you may turn your head, like if it feels okay to turn your head, go for it. So I'm going to do 2 more breaths here with this twist. All right, so I'm going to release my shoulder blade, so I'm no longer moving that upper back into the twist, still kind of facing this way, and giving myself this little extra bit of support as I kind of lean so that I get this little bit of stretch without causing too much crazy nonsense for my neck. Just the tiniest bit of sensation there. Mostly I'm after my low back here. Oh, and as soon as I feel that, I pause and start breathing, because those muscles often relax for me, and then I can go in a little bit more. But I want to go, like when I'm practicing, I don't want to go like as far as I can. I want to go to the point where I feel something. Generally speaking, that's a more gentle way to practice, and I think it's more sound long term. I'm hoping to make it to, you know, like my 110s, 120s. If I do, I'll report back. But in any case, if I can get that far in life, I want to still be able to practice yoga when I get there. Oh. So a more conservative approach to the practice might be warranted. So I'm just feeling out that place. I'm going to breathe about 4 more breaths or so. Okay, so I'm going to follow myself all the way up with a nice big inhale. Again, I'm going to pause in the middle just for a moment, let everything settle. And I've got one more thing to do while I'm here. I'm going to fold forward just to come back into this territory of the inner thighs. And it may or may not take a lot of forward momentum to get somewhere. And if you're the kind of person whose pelvis tends to lean backwards instead of forwards, a lot of us have that genetic setup, just the shape of the bones. You could lay on your back and put your legs up on the edge of the wall or up on the edge of the couch or whatever, so that you've got a little bit of a V and the legs are being held by something, wall, couch, bed, something. So that you can get the inner thigh without any trauma to your low back. For me, my pelvis does tend to lean forward, so I'm probably going to be all right. So I'm just building up a little structure here with a couple of yoga blocks to rest my elbows on, and then I have a head support. So I can bring the pelvis forward until I feel something in my inner thighs. And then, yeah, I'm just going to pause there and breathe. And if it feels like I want to go further, I can always go further, you know, as I go along. So just notice what's right for you. So for the most part, we've kind of hit the hips in all different angles. We've hit external rotators, we've done some adductors, some abductors, we've done some hip flexor work. So hopefully with this little kind of really gentle sequence, you will you know, have a nice experience of free movement in your hips when we're done. Let me know if it went well. Okay, so I'm going to take 2 more breaths here. And then coming all the way back up, and I'm going to release my legs from that wide position. And at this point, essentially, I'm going to do a relaxation. Now, I'm going to do an elevated leg, quite dramatically elevated leg, so that I get like a mini inversion. If you like legs up the wall or something like that, you could do that instead of this sort of thing. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this big pillow and a couple of yoga blocks, and I'm going to create a Stonehenge. I just need it to be wide enough apart that my legs can mostly just rest over the posts here. Okay, so then I'm going to put my legs up over this guy and adjust the head support once I get there. Now the hardest part for me is not knocking it over on my way in. So I just want to put one leg on top of each post. Oh. And one of the one restorative yoga class that I took called the Stonehenge pose. So there you have it. If you have built a little yoga Stonehenge at your house, you can also do Stonehenge pose. Now I'm trying to find like the most comfortable position for my arms to rest. I'm giving my head whatever amount of support it feels like it needs. I feel like I need just a tiny bit more like padding right back here. Oh, I'm gonna see if I can get it smooth enough to feel okay. All right, and then I'm gonna just rest here for a few minutes. And that'll end our class tonight. So give yourself a resting position that works for you, even if it's just stretched out in corpse pose and you don't have the elevated legs. Try to soften like all of the muscle in your face. Let your eyes relax and your jaw relax so the teeth come apart just a little bit and the lips get softer. And so the eyes get a little deeper and a little kinder. Yourself relax maybe a little bit more deeply now that you've been here a while. See if there's anywhere else that might be kind of holding on or holding a grip. And just let go. Hip sockets. Shoulders. Anywhere where you might normally carry a little bit of extra tension. See if you could relax those places out. Just a notch more. take one more breath where I am. And then I have to kind of destroy my little Stonehenge. So I'm going to put my legs on either side of it and kind of push it over. And then I can roll myself over to my side. And you may decide you want to lay on your side for a little bit. So you can kind of prop yourself up or use your arm for a pillow. And just pause, especially if your legs were all the way up the wall. Give yourself a few moments to pause here so the blood pressure kind of shifts back into a more normal range. Often when we put the legs up, the blood pressure drops a little bit because the blood returns to the heart a little more easily. Oh. So then, when you're ready, come on up. So thanks for joining me for a little evening hip-focused, gentle yoga. Let's take a nice big breath together. Big inhale. And a big sigh. Namaste, yogis. Welcome to the rest of your night.